Hello, and welcome everybody to this webinar from Curo Compensation. My name is Ruth Thomas, and I'm Industry Principal and also a co-founder here at Curo, and I'll be taking you through this webinar today. And today's session is a best practice webinar focusing on the future of reward. And what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to look at how, for many of us, our current approaches for reward assume that we're going to continue to work in a similar way, and that the market for talent will stay the same. But we all know that we're in a period of disruption and change. So in this session, I wanted to address what some of those changes might be and look at how we might adapt our reward practices in response. So before I start, I'm just going to go through the agenda and some housekeeping items. So you are actually all on mute, so none of you can participate in the call at this stage. The session will run for about 30 minutes or slightly less, and I will open the floor to questions at the end of my pack. And if you want to submit a question live, then you can do that through the chat box in the Join Me panel, which you can probably see maybe at the side or on the top of your screen. So it's just the speech mark sign. So if you click on that, you'll be able to type in a question, and I will attempt to answer those. If you don't want to submit a question live, that's absolutely fine. You can contact us afterwards, either through our website or through the email that I'll share with you at the end of the session. We love hearing from you, and I love your questions, and I always endeavour to answer them all. So, please do get in touch. We are recording the session, and we'll make that available through our website as well once we've completed. And if you would like a copy of the deck for future reference, we are happy to share those with those of you that get in touch. So, please again, just get in touch either through the website or through your normal Curo contact, and they can pass that deck through to you. So in terms of the agenda, I was going to run through a quick introduction to Curo for those of you who don't know who we are, and then I'm going to go straight onto our content. So I'm going to look at what some of the drivers for change and the new challenges that we're seeing in our workplaces today, and then what some of the reward responses might be to that. And then I'm going to look at some more forward-thinking reward tactics that are happening in the marketplace, and also a quick touch on technology and how that might impact the way that we work. And then, as I said at the end, I'll open the floor to questions. So, quick introduction to Curo. So we are an HR technology company, and we focus on compensation management solutions. And we work with many leading companies to help them manage and optimize their compensation spend. Our portfolio of products aim to support you with the reward challenges that you face, whatever size of business you are. And we have over 70 clients, many operating globally on our platforms. And we work with a growing list of partners who help us to both implement and distribute our products. And here's a sample of some of the client base with whom we work. And if you'd like to find out any more about us, the company, our products, then again, go over to our website, www.curocomp.com, and you can find all this information here. We've just relaunched our website, so if you haven't had a look at that yet, please go over there, have a look at the new look and feel, give us any feedback that you fancy giving us. We're always open to feedback, and you can find easily ways to get in touch with us there as well. Okay, so I promised to talk about the future and what our future processes might be, but I don't know about you, but right now today, it feels like we're sort of stuck in some kind of holding pattern when it comes to managing reward and talent, with some key economic issues challenging us. Since the economic fallout of 2008, we've been trying to manage pay in an environment of restrained wage growth. And unfortunately, for 2018, the pay squeeze is predicted to continue with real income not increasing at all. Then we have this economic conundrum known as the productivity puzzle. And over the past 10 years, productivity growth, both in the UK and the US, has been the weakest since modern records begun. And really from 2011 onwards, labour productivity has grown to a crawl. And despite low unemployment, in both markets, we are still experiencing talent shortages with lack of key skills. So this holding pattern is perhaps a sign that we're struggling to respond to the rapid pace of change in the workplace and the world of work around us, and that we need to start working now with our business leaders to prepare for a future that is more agile and digital. So what is driving that change around us? I'm going to mention 4 key themes, and I'll walk you through those now. So the first of those is Industry 4.0. You might have heard of this, also known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And this recognizes that we're moving into a period where cyber-physical systems, the Internet of Things, cloud and cyber computing will become the norm. And as with each successive industrial revolution that you can see mapped out here, we are seeing social upheaval, new ways of working, and new demands for skills and talent that we need to respond to. Yes, the robots are coming for our jobs, and we need to come to terms with how we will manage a no-collar workforce. To date, this term has been used to refer to millennial employees who tend to eschew traditional collar definitions. But Deloitte, in their tech predictions for 2018, used the term to describe a workforce where human workers and machines will work together seamlessly in a single loop of productivity, or some kind of hybrid human workforce. And I like this more embracing approach of how AI and technology will impact human capital, rather than the alarmist robots are coming for your jobs headlines. Sorry, I'm just going to go back there. I just went on too quickly. So Deloitte predict that intelligent automation solutions will be able to augment human performance rather than replace it by automating certain parts of a task, and thus freeing us to focus on the more human aspects that we're good at, that at the moment robots can't do. Things like empathetic problem-solving skills, social skills, emotional intelligence, and creativity. So we need to think about how we reorganize the workforce, redesign jobs in the workplace, and reskill workers to better take advantage of the human skills that can't be replaced by technology. Another compelling trend impacting the workplace is the rise of the contingent workforce and the reclassification of workers with alternative work arrangements. And you can see here the numbers across different types of employment are on the rise. Whether this is companies trying to reduce costs or buy in scarce skills, or even displaced workers trying to find work, we need to adapt our HR processes to prevent the negative headlines that have hit some employers, like Uber, for example. So I've just talked about diversity in terms of the hybrid workforce, but we're also seeing diversity in terms of the multi-generational workforce in our workplaces today, with baby boomers, Gen X and millennials each having different expectations of what the employee experience is. And now we have Gen Z, the new cohort coming up, that aren't actually mentioned in this diagram here. So the first of our Gen Z employees are starting to hit the workplace. And there has been a lot of focus on generational groups. I'm sure most of us have had to spend some time in the last 2 years looking at the millennial issue and understanding what problems that might cause for our organisation, or where our focus needs to be. But I found this study interesting by the consultancy, The Great Place to Work, and its Trust Index survey highlighted that it's not as simple as responding to generational stereotypes. And when looking at employee engagement specifically, they found that there was more differences between the age groups than there were between generations, which actually just leads us to more diversity. So I guess the point here is not to overgeneralize when it comes to generational cohorts, but we do need to consider the diverse intergenerational workforce that we are managing and the issues that they bring. So these new challenges that I've just mentioned are bringing us some key challenges in HR. We're seeing this hybrid and diverse talent base emerging that I've just talked about. Together with that, we have a rise of skill-based work as opposed to job-based work, where in some cases, what you bring to the job, the input to the job, is more relevant than the output. And that really challenges some of the traditional ways we've evaluated, benchmarked, and assessed jobs. And there's definitely a need for a more dynamic deployment of talent as opposed to the traditional career models that we've used to date, if we're going to be able to keep pace with change and the different types of employees, or rather workers, that we're engaging. So in the face of these challenges, how are you going to manage reward? Well, I'm going to suggest some alternative approaches, but I will allow myself a caveat right here that we've seen how disruption can impact the status quo and change completely the way that we do things. So who can really predict that money will have the same meaning as the basic exchange of labour for pay, and whether that will still exist? But I'm going to have a go at suggesting some of the things that we might want to think about on the premise that we're still paying people in money. So the first of those is looking at reward as an investment to be optimised rather than a cost to be minimised. For a long time now in reward, we've had an approach where compensation has been referred to as the largest expense on your balance sheet. We spend a significant amount of time controlling compensation budgets, planning compensation budgets, moderating compensation budgets, and pay rises are often seen as the cost of doing business, particularly in the current environment of restrained wage growth, where differentiation is very hard to achieve. So I think it's time to turn this around and start to think of reward as an investment to be optimised. And to do this, you need to really understand in your organisations what you are currently paying for, make sure you know that you want what you want to pay for, and perhaps most importantly, establish some key performance indicators to assess the effectiveness of your reward strategy so you can then measure the ROI. I think what we're very good at doing within reward and within HR is articulating our reward strategy, but what we perhaps don't spend as much time do is actually measuring whether that reward strategy, our reward principles and tactics have been successful. And that's probably because we're spending a large amount of time managing those processes and moderating those processes. And there is a whole body of research that supports that there is this disconnect between where we spend our time in reward and actually what CEOs want us to spend our time doing. And you can see those outlined there. So we spend a lot of time focusing on benchmarking. More recently, and many of us have spent time, focusing because of legislative changes on compensation fairness and equity, and that area of controlling and moderating compensation costs. Whereas what our CEOs want us to do are those things that I was just talking about in terms of estimating reward, maximising your optimisation on investment of reward. So while we're talking about optimising your investment, I think it's worth pursuing a broader recognition of employee value here too. I'm sure many of you are using the traditional pay for performance approach that I'm showing here, where we calibrate both pay internally, we look at people's performance, we look at external pay, and that helps us to how we evaluate our employees in the workplace and their value. A pay for talent approach aims to calibrate multiple factors, both past and present, in order to capture employee value. So this looks at using other talent metrics such as retention risk, critical skills, and future talent to support pay decisions. And this may be a more effective approach. So for some people, they're doing this by removing performance ratings and then having an annual discussion about the total value of an employee in calibration sessions as a driver for deciding on compensation decisions. Some are using hard talent metrics in merit matrices. So in the same way that we used a merit matrix that combined performance rating with benchmarking or market data, they're also incorporating some of the talent metrics coming out of the other talent processes in your organization. And I know some organizations have come up with complex analytical algorithms that calculate an employee's value and future value to the organization. I was just hearing about one of those yesterday at a conference I attended, Coca-Cola. They have what they call a talent segmentation index, which tries to identify individuals with future potential to drive growth in the business. And they do that through some analytical modeling across a large cross-section of employee data that they have. So all of this is a subtle shift, but I think it will help to future-proof your reward programs when it comes to valuing employees. I've talked earlier about the growing diversity of our workforce, and I think we all need to think about how we can leverage different types of talent, but we also need to think about how we can reward them. So I think it's time to do away with a one-size-fits-all model of reward and instead bring increased personalization to the employee value proposition. Now, we've seen this in employee benefits for some time now, but I think it's time we need to consider this in mainstream reward. If you haven't seen Daniel Hibbett's work, The Thundercloud, I would recommend it. He addresses how to manage reward in the digital age and recognizes that as we adapt to the future, organizations may have multiple talent models coexisting, and each model may require a different pay structure. And I'm sharing this image here from Daniel's work, where you can see he's identified different types of talent model on the left-hand side of the screen, the characteristics associated in terms of skill acquisition and career development, and then how we may need different pay frameworks to support this. The key to success here is in combining these different pay frameworks and talent models is having an overarching reward philosophy with common reward principles. My final observation here is the need to get ready for real-time reward. Traditional models of performance management have been challenged, and we know this, we've read a lot about this, and employers are now deploying, we know, ongoing approaches to talent assessment with continuous conversations and feedback, and much more of a focus on coaching and development rather than annual evaluation. I think it's inevitable reward allocation will follow this, and managers will want to be able to benchmark their employees on an ongoing basis and allocate rewards when the effort takes place. And I think this will be much more in line with the project, team, and skills-based approaches to working that we will move to in the future. Now, I know this sounds quite frightening because most of us have been around long enough, or I know I have been around long enough, where we've moved reward from those continuous salary changes or those anniversary-based reviews. But really, there is reward technology around now that can help to support real-time benchmarking. And probably the most difficult thing there is the budget tracking that was obviously associated with managing reward across the year. And there are a whole array of other future reward tactics out there. I'm just going to put a few up here and mention them, just because I find them all really interesting approaches. There's crowdsourced pay, which really is in line with crowdsourced feedback, where this is really employee-nominated pay in the workplace. And while, again, that sounds quite scary, I think the people that are actually deploying this in organizations are really sort of allocating a small part of their pay budget for peer-nominated pay. And sometimes that's done ad hoc throughout the year, so maybe people will be awarded monthly, and sometimes it's done in the form of points that are then calibrated at the end of the year and distributed through the normal annual cycle. If you've attended some of my webinars before and you've been on our transparency webinars, I've talked a lot about open salaries and those companies, particularly in the tech sector, who are pushing the boundaries in terms of complete pay transparency. And I think this is something that will become increasingly more important. We're seeing gig payments now through gig platforms who are employing contingent workers, and Gravity payments that I mentioned here. Gravity is actually a company name, not the type of payment, but as a company, they decided to enforce a $70,000 US minimum wage for all their employees to retain talent, and in a way to take money out of the engagement equation. And this is in line with some psychological studies that have shown that there's not an ongoing linear relationship between money and happiness. So unfortunately, the more money you have doesn't make you more happier. And some of those psychological studies have indicated that $70,000 is where that bottoms out. So once you earn beyond that, you don't necessarily become happier. Pay to quit is an approach that was adopted by a company called Zappos, who were brought out by Amazon. What they did is they went with the approach of offering employees $4,000 to quit after 4 months of employment in order to test commitment and retain only those employees who want to stay, which I find really interesting, in terms of testing engagement and commitment to the company. So they're all really interesting ideas that some more forward-thinking companies are playing around with, and some of these obviously may become mainstream later on. My last point there, meaning is the new money. I'm going to return to the caveat I made earlier about money, and this sort of links back to, if you've read Dan Pink's work about the psychological view as to whether money is actually a motivator at all, and whether it's more of a dissatisfier in terms of engaging employees. And Tammy Erickson, who's a writer in this field, her Harvard Business Review article talked about that whether meaning is actually the new money rather than cash, and about how work is becoming more a matter of discretionary effort, and that in an environment like that, intrinsic rewards can be more motivating than extrinsic rewards like pay. So I'm going to finish up just talking a little bit about technology. Bearing in mind I work for a technology company, the irony is not lost on me that when we talk about technology driving fundamental changes in our workplace, when it comes to managing compensation, we see the lowest adoption rates in leveraging technology in comparison to other talent management areas. So in this world of increasing change and complexity that I've just spoken about, we really need technology to help us. We need to help us automate processes. We need to be able to help us improve the way we manage compensation data. And we need to help us to support those new approaches to reward that I've talked about. And also that really important pillar in terms of ensuring equity, transparency, and risk management in reward management. And there are a whole array of new technology trends out there that are starting to get traction in HR. So we have things like AI and chatbots coming into recruitment. I think I just read an article yesterday about a company, where your first interviews are all with chatbots. And then we have, the learning sector has been deploying some of these more forward-thinking technology trends with gamification and augmented reality. I think it's really interesting to think about how this might cross over into reward. I'm sort of thinking about wearing some form of augmented reality headset when it comes to choosing the amount of my pension contribution. And I might be able to visualize what my future retirement might look like based on the amount of pension contribution I make. Or maybe it'll be some form of social media that will allow us to like employees through that type of crowdsourced pay arrangement that I mentioned earlier. Or maybe we'll be bringing in gamification tactics into sales compensation, which again is quite a frightening thought. I'm not really sure where this is all going to end up, but it's quite exciting to think about it. But part of your future proofing, you need to consider how you can leverage technology to make your reward processes more effective. So really, I think it's an exciting time for us in reward, and I think we need to embrace change and be challenged, to respond to the agile and digital future ahead of us. And I think it's important that we support our business leaders in making this change happen and make sure as a function that we anticipate change rather than respond to it. And I know Jack Welch's approaches to management may have been turned on their head in this current environment, but I think this Welchism still for me applies, that if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, then the end is near. So as organisations, we really need to get our game together and plan for the future. So I think we're just on time there. That's great. So I've just covered the content there. I know some of you joined late, so I'll just rerun through some of the housekeeping. I'm going to open the floor to questions in a second, but if you're worried that you've missed some of the webinar, we are recording it and it will be available through our website. And as I said earlier, if you wish to request a copy of the deck, then you can do that by getting in touch again through our website. But I will open the floor to questions. So the way that if you want to submit a live question now, then you can do that through the chat button on the Join Me panel. So if you type that in there, I will be able to pick that up and I will try and answer the question. But again, if you don't want to do that, then get in touch through any of these sources here and we will be able to answer your questions afterwards. So I'll just leave the floor for you to see if anybody wants to submit any questions. And while I let you do that, just to say, we have regular webinars that happen, and you can find out all the information about that on our website. I think we have another webinar next week scheduled on Thursday. I think I've just set a new series of them. So if you're interested in coming to any of those, please do join those as well. Okay, I can't see any questions coming through on live. I do normally hear from some of you afterwards. So great to have you with us today, and look forward to seeing you again at one of our sessions soon. Thank you very much.